Right, everybody. So this presentation is going to go through some examples of photographs that didn't quite follow some of these compositional rules, and I'll kind of talk about how they could be improved if they did follow some of these rules. Because I think sometimes by learning what not to do, it helps us better understand what we should be doing. So here we go. All right, so here we see a photograph of a dead tree in the middle of some kind of prairie mountain, kind of stormy situation going on. Clearly, this photograph did not follow the rule of thirds. And I would say not every single photograph needs to have their focal point line up where those grid lines overlap. So I would say the focal point in this image is the tree. I kind of actually like how it's in the middle of the image. It gives it this very like stagnant sense of alone feeling. But I feel like the way that it's cropped, where we don't get a lot of depth around it, or there's not much else to look at, it's just kind of a boring image. There's nice contrast with the more yellowy grass and the gray-blue background. I like that contrast. The lighting is interesting. But if there is more of like something happening in the foreground, middle ground, or background instead of really just the tree we're looking at, or just something else going on, I think it'd be a more interesting photograph to look at. Maybe if it was taken from a further distance, maybe if there are more trees, like getting a little unity and variety thing going on, or maybe changing the placement of the tree could make it look better. So not like the worst photograph ever, but just kind of boring. I think they could have framed it differently to make it more interesting to look at. All right. Here we have a group of strawberries, but they all kind of just start blending together, and that has to do with not following the rule of odds. So not only are there an even number of subjects for strawberries, the issue is more to do with how they're all clumped together. It does follow the rule of odds where the strawberries are at different angles. They're not all just in a straight line in the same direction, but there's not a variety of spacing. So where rule of odds and depth kind of overlap, this would have worked a lot better if some of the strawberries were pushed forward, some were pushed back. Right now the strawberries are overlapping in a way where they just create one big blob. It would work better if there was some distance between them. Maybe they make a foreground, middle ground, and background of strawberries, and then that would change kind of the size that we're viewing them at. I also wonder if just the perspective, like if the camera was more on top of them, if it would look a little bit better and less blobby. And then the unity and variety. All these strawberries kind of look the same. I wonder if they could have selected more unique strawberries to have a little bit more variety here. It's all kind of just the same. Here we got a nice documentation of some kind of water bird. Is it like a white egret or something? And I would say this is a great documentation of the bird. Like we can see it in focus pretty well. It's a cool reflection. The color on the water is really interesting. However, the way they cropped it makes it just that, where it's just kind of a documentation of the bird. I think if they would have changed the cropping, maybe backed up a little bit, gave it some lead room. So right now it's cropped almost right in front of where that egret is what I'm going to call it, almost right in front of it. So if they gave a little bit more space in what direction it was looking or walking, it would give the viewer a little bit more breathing room to enjoy it. I also wonder if it was centered a little bit more, like where we see the head and the shadow, where there's not as much space down here, there's more space up here. Maybe if there was a little bit more space down here, or if they cropped it in here, gave a little bit more space. Maybe we could also see some more of the ripple from the legs, just a little bit more in the image, while still getting the close-up detail of the bird itself. Would make it more interesting. And then lastly, we have this dude doing a cool trick on his bike. I'm assuming it's a cool trick. So again, this is kind of like a documentation. It's hard in photography when something's moving fast to be able to capture it without it being blurry and to like really do some thoughtful planning of how it's going to look when you're working so quick in the moment. However, even like they could have cropped this after the fact. There's so much negative space over here. It's like, what's the point of all this? And then the figures getting kind of lost in the crowd in the background. So I wonder why the photographer didn't position himself a little bit better so that more of the background would be behind the cool biker person instead of overlapping with the audience, because like we don't really need to see them. I don't think that's part of the image. So it's kind of a shame that it overlaps and that they've left so much uncropped. So these are just some examples of what to think about as you are going to be creating your own images. If you have any other questions about just what these rules mean in general, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk with you a little bit more. Otherwise, have a good rest of your day.